So can you see the screen?
Yes, Michael.
Okay,
Yes.
great. All right. What I thought I would do is got to mention that I'm the Vice President of the Excellence Award Council for the Association of Manufacturing Excellence, and that's a volunteer position. I do that just because I'm so passionate about performance improvement. As I listened to Professor Collin and to Hassan prior to him talk, I was thinking about 16 other things that I could share during this presentation, but I'll try to stay focused on what's important. And what I thought I would do is I've been in hundreds of companies where I've been a member of a team assessing their improvement practices. And I also I was the president of a consulting company in Chicago for about 25 years. And we did that work. I'm retired, but I stay engaged through AME and through doing activities like this, which are fun. Although the hour is very early for me, it's 4 a.m. here in California. So thank you. So I want to share my perspective as an assessor. And what I've seen over the years, and many studies have shown this, is somewhere between 5% and possibly 10% of the companies that improve are really highly effective at improving. Most organizations are not dysfunctional, but they're far less effective at improving. If you look at a company like Toyota that has a reputation as being outstanding at improving, very few organizations approach their capability with the way they go about it. It's really not that complicated. It's not that hard to know what it is that we should do. And so many people take these tools and use them in a highly effective way, nor do they really have the discipline to do this in a very deep fashion where there's a real, I think, deep understanding of the tools. And what I want to try to impart here is a deeper understanding of a couple of things. Professor Collin shared a number of things on resetting the business. I've given a number of presentations on that topic. And when Hassan was talking, he was talking about skills development and gaining the knowledge on what it is that we need to be doing things to understand best practices. So I want to focus on three things, and they relate to some of the things that both of them were talking about. What are some things we should do to just get the basics right, some foundational elements of effective improvement practices? I saw there was a post in the chat of, well, what about the people? And the people are key to making this happen. So I want to come back to that. And then I want to close with the idea of talking about practice, because just like professional athletes, if I want to get better at improving in my sport, I need to practice doing it. We need to be doing the same thing with our improvement activities. So in the US, I don't know if many of you in Africa or India have seen this movie, but it was a very famous movie from the 1930s in the United States called The Wizard of Oz. And this is a picture of Oz, the Grand Wizard, the person who knows everything, who tells you what it is that you need to be doing and whom we should all obey. And there's some leaders that like to operate their company that way, that I'm all knowing and I'm going to tell you what it is you need to do, and I simply expect you to execute it. That's one way to lead. There's another way that we could lead, and I think C.S. Lewis, an author of many great books, and he wrote a whole series of books, one called The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that we read to our children many times over the years, and now I get to see my children reading those same books from Lewis to our grandchildren, which is fantastic. But he talked about humility. And humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's really thinking of yourself less, and I would add the word often. I'm not so much focused on myself, but I begin to focus on others. And the question that I would ask is, what do I see in a tour? Let me get to the full screen view here. I didn't realize I wasn't doing that. What would I see in your business if I was in there to do an assessment? So if the team was in there, one of the things that we'll look at is, what is the leadership team doing? In an assessment, it typically starts with the leader giving us a presentation of, this is what we do. Hassan talked about products and the value chain. The leader would share some of what it is that's going on with there, and then we would take a tour of their operation. Well, as assessors, one of the things that we're looking at right there, right away, is how does the senior leader and how do the middle managers operate? When they talk to people, do they look them in the eye? Does the senior leader, is that the only person that talks, or do we have an opportunity for other people to talk? When we're walking through the operation, what's the interaction between the leadership team and the people that are there working in that operation? Those are things that we're all observing at the very beginning to get a feel for how does this leadership team work? And is this the leadership team that's more to the command and control end of the spectrum, or can I see that there's a lot of humility there? And the reason that you want humility is extremely practical. It's not to just be a good guy or a good woman. It's a very practical thing. If I'm acting in a humble way, what I'm doing is I'm really creating space inside my organization. And what I've observed in humble leaders over the years is they're much more willing to learn. They don't feel like they have all the answers. They realize there's more than one way to do anything. And so they're open to that dialogue, and it creates space to begin to engage my people. So one of the very first things that we're looking at is to get an understanding of how does this leadership team operate. Next, I want to just talk about two foundational elements. I've done a lot of work within the world of something called Lean, and Lean is really an improvement methodology based on the Toyota Motor Company, and it's people trying to emulate the Toyota production system or the Toyota management system. And within that, there's a couple of foundational things. But there's this quote that I've heard several people make over the years. When I very first started in the world of performance improvement, there were two icons. There was a man named W. Edwards Deming and Dr. Joseph Duran, and I was able to spend time with both of them in the 1980s. Unfortunately, I was not smart enough to learn everything they could teach me, but I did learn a lot. And later on, Taiichi Ono said something extremely similar to Ono was from Toyota, and that's without a standard, there is no logical basis for decision making or taking action. In the 80s, when I first heard that, I thought, well, I understand that. It's a bunch of operating processes. There's this thing that it is that we're really supposed to be doing to make improvement happen. But really, my understanding today is that's just the most basic level of what having a standard is about, that I've got a procedure that it is that we're supposed to follow. It gets to be more sophisticated if I'm looking at a company and what they're doing for standard work, and I can see that indeed these companies, not only do they have an operating procedure, but it's really a best practice. They've tested the best practice, they vetted it, and this best practice, we're consistently making people certain that people are operating this way. And if we have a best practice, we're sharing that across our company. And if I'm a member of a large global organization, I'm sharing it between companies. So that starts more sophisticated. But ultimately, what I want to really be seeing, if I'm looking for one of those companies that's in the 5% to 10%, I want to see the mindset. What is it that's going on in their head? How do these people really think about standard work? And a quote that you don't hear from Taiichi Ono very often, but I love, is he said several times, I assume that everything is a mess. We are always seeking a better way. And if you look at your world that way, that it's all a mess, and the only thing that we can do to this is possibly make it better, it causes a certain mindset in an organization. So the one that's on the journey, the mindset that's there, what is happening there is I've got an organization that has the best practice, and they're really trying to fairly rigidly stay with that best practice. But if I've got this mindset that there's always a better way, it really fits within the spirit of continuous improvement. And what I'm doing is I'm setting up processes, I'm setting up protocols within my business where I want the people to be finding ways to improve this on an ongoing basis. And I'll come back to that. The other thing that I typically see when I go into organizations these days are some sort of visual reporting. And I would guess if I were to go into your companies, I would see some sort of a visual board that's there. But when an assessor is looking at these visual boards, looking at the improvement practices, what we'll typically see is their activity counts. So for safety, did we have any injuries? With all due respect to those of you that have companies in Africa and those of you in India, when I've walked through those operations over the years, and I look at the safety practices there versus what I've seen in Europe, what I've seen in Australia, even what I've seen in China, I'm not always focused on really safe working practices. What I really tend to be focused on is getting things done. And when Colin was mentioning COVID is creating an opportunity for us to do something differently, really within safety, you've got an opportunity to change the paradigm in your countries for how it is that you're approaching safety, because there's so many things we need to be doing post-COVID, or actually within COVID. to make changes happen. But what I really want to do when I'm looking at these boards is what are they doing to motivate behavior change? And let me share a story with you that articulates what I'm talking about. So this is a picture of an information board that was a manufacturing company in Chicago, and they manufactured fractional horsepower motors. And they were about 70% of their sales were custom designed motors. So they would go into things like ice crushing machines. And in the US, we have these popcorn makers. I don't know if they make popcorn anywhere else in the world, but they'd go into these machines that all needed small engines. 70% of them were a custom design. So when sales went out to make a call, they typically would come back and they would need this request for proposal to be prepared by engineering to how much does it cost to make the design, are you able to do this, and get it back to the customer. And so there's a young design engineer named Jordan. And one of the things that's a problem, I can't remember if it was Colin or Hassan that spoke about the changing work practices and how a lot more of this is going to be on the service side. I think it was Hassan. He talked about how manufacturing isn't going to be so much direct labor anymore, but it's going to be people supporting direct labor. Well, when you go to the support services, it's very difficult to know what their capacity is for being able to do work. And one of the best things you can do for some of those departments is to make a picture that highlights this. And what happened here is Jordan wanted to know how much work can design engineers work? How many requests for proposals can we work on at one point in time? And just to keep it simple, let's say they had 5 engineers and they could work on 5 requests for proposals at any given point in time. And so after they did that analysis, Jordan floated it with sales. He talked to the people in purchasing. He talked to the people in operations, who were all the departments that this process impacted. And everybody said, yeah, that looks reasonable. We all agree that 5 and 5 proper. So our capacity for doing requests for proposals is 25. Twice a week, sales, operations, purchasing, and design engineering were coming to review the projects that were on this board. And if sales came in with opportunity request for proposal number 26, Jordan could now have a conversation that he couldn't previously have. He said, well, we've got 25 here, and yes, sales, we're happy to take a request for proposal number 26, but tell me which one of the 25 you want me to take out, because we've all agreed that our capacity is 25 for doing this work. What that ended up doing is it changed the dialogue, because prior to this, what sales would do, if I'm a salesperson and I've got an opportunity to win a bid, I'm going to get a commission on this. It's great. I just want to take this and send it off to engineering and make it happen. Well, now we've got to go through an honest dialogue that we've only got this capacity. And the behavioral change that I want to talk about, if your boards aren't doing something like this, you need to continue to improve your boards, because this is what they should do. Sales is looking at this, and in this company, they won maybe 1/3 of their requests for proposals. Everybody knew this. It was in all the reports. It had happened this way for years. It was the norm. 1/3 of the time we win these proposals. Well, now twice a week we're here and we're looking at this board, and I'm confronted with this picture. I can see it with my eyes, and much of this is learning to see. And as I look at it, I can see that, oh my gosh, we're only winning these things 1/3 of the time. And I've got opportunity here, number 26, that I would like for them to be working on. So what happened over the next 10 months is sales began to change the way that they began to vet the proposals that they were putting into the bucket. And so rather than, one of the things they found is one of the big reasons they didn't win proposals is the customer simply wanted a competitive bid. They were planning to work with somebody else. So all that sales had to do was do some more probing. Colin talked about critical success factors. What are some of the critical success factors I need to understand as I'm doing this? What are some of the critical success factors to a successful sale? So they began to probe more. Within 10 months, there was no process improvement activity. There were no Kaizen teams. Within 10 months, they went from winning 1/3 of the proposals to 2/3 of the proposals, simply using this board as an information document for communication and better vetting what it was that was going on. So when I look at these boards, a lot of them are used for decision. Are they being used for decision making? That's good. And activity counts can help you doing that. It gets more sophisticated if I start to see that there are some problems that are identified in this board. But are these boards really being used to help us do a better job of the way that it is I'm doing work inside this company, and as a leader, the way that I'm leading and making decisions as a leader, as a manager. That's what I want to see. And in the 5% to 10% of the companies that they're doing it at that level. The next thing is, I love that comment that was made about people. And the definition that I like to use for leadership is a leader's job is to create an environment where people can do their best possible work. Yet, if you go back to the way that a lot of leaders like to operate, they're driving with this fear. Dr. Deming was one of the first that I talked about driving fear of the workplace. But that whole idea that some people have as leaders, that if I scare people, they're going to do the right thing, because if they don't do the right thing, I'm going to punish them. But at the end of the day, if you've got an operation like that, people are afraid to act. They're afraid to let you know when something's wrong. If I see a quality problem, the last thing I want to do is identify it. I just want to pass it along because I don't want to be in trouble because we had a quality problem. And so driving that fear out is one of the key things that it is that we need to be doing. When I worked in industry, as a leader, I thought I always did a pretty good job of developing my people, and I always gave them credit for the work that it was that they did. So intellectually, I've known for a long time the importance of engaging people. But in the 1990s, a woman named Pearlie gave me a gift. And I was teaching Pearlie's organization. Pearlie was one of the operators on a line. And I was teaching the organization how to do Kaizen teams. And this is early in my work using kind of under the Toyota umbrella of the work that I was doing. And we had done a Kaizen team. We'd made a significant improvement to a production line. We pulled a lot of time out of the changeover. We presented to management. Everybody loved what it was that we did. We're back in the room. I'm ready to fly back from Shreveport, Louisiana, a company in the southern part of the US, to Chicago, where I lived at the time. And I asked everybody, I said, well, you spent a week of your life doing this project. What'd you get out of it? And we go around and everybody says nice stuff. And we come to Pearlie. And Pearlie says, I've worked for this company for 25 years. It's the first time they ever asked me to think, and I really liked it. And when Pearlie said that, it made me realize, it helped me to see something that I didn't see before. And what I saw was the emotional toil that from managing with that fear, from not really allowing our people to develop, to be in that environment where they can do their best work, that it is so emotionally draining on the people that are there. And I never understood the emotional impact of that. I understood the logical side of it because my background was IT and information systems and financial things. But I didn't really understand that emotional thing. And when Pearlie gave me that gift, and it was 1998, it changed my life, and it changed the way that I talk to leaders through this day. I still thank Pearlie for the gift that she gave me those many yeyears ago. There's also an Indian cricket player that said something I think that fits. Sachin Tendulkar. I'm probably crucifying his name, but it's so easy to hate and it's so difficult to love. And if you look at what's going on in the world today, there's so much tribalism that happens. I've got my tribe. In the U.S., we've got the liberals and we've got the conservatives, and we've got there's just we do it by races, and we do all sorts of crazy stuff. And I've seen the same thing in China. I've seen the same thing in India. I've seen the same thing in Africa, the countries where we've been, where we've all got these little groups of people that we're comfortable with. It's really difficult to get an understanding of the other person's perspective, of the other groups, but there is so much power that's there in diversity and taking advantage of that. I'm so hopeful in our country, in the US, that the horrible killing of George Floyd can finally push us to do even more for race relations in our country, where we can be more appreciative of people with different skin color than whatever it is that we happen to have. Sachin also went on to say that this is how the scheme of things work. Is anything that's good is really hard to do. It's so easy to do the bad stuff. But if you're going to do something that's good, it requires some critical thought, it requires some understanding, and it's hard work. And I think that's part of the reason why organizations just do sort of a half-baked job of improving, because it's very difficult and they can't understand. So coming to the idea of practice, to close this out, another thing that I'll ask when I'm in doing a site visit is, let's say, standard work, are the visual boards. What I want to know is, what did those boards do to change your behaviors as a leader? and how are you operating as a leader differently this year than last year? So can you tell me something that you do differently now than what you were doing last year? And what is your plan? What are you working on to do even better next year? And what do you want to start to look at then, or what are things is we can do to be practicing this to get good feedback? Another point that Hassan made was that for a lot of countries in Africa, there's limited access to knowledge of best practices. There's another opportunity for you guys today. So many people are doing things virtually. Within the Association of Manufacturing Excellence, and I've got a link to that on the next slide, you should tie into some of the things going on with AME, probably within Colin's organization and others, where I can see things virtually and pick those up where you do not have to physically go and be at that plant anymore. There's a lot of new things that are happening. And we also have an assessment. It's a little different from what I heard Hassan talk about, and I think could be complementary to it. We call it the AME for the Association of Manufacturing Excellence, Lean Sensei. It's free. If you use this link, you can download it. And it's 60 questions. And even if you're not running an overall company, but let's say you're a team leader, you can take some of these questions, and each of the 60 questions has a description of what is a highly effective company doing, what's a company that's on the journey doing, and what's a company that's just getting started doing. And so rather than just having these words like you should do leader standard work, there is an explanation in there that gives I think a little more of a picture of what's happening at a high level, a highly effective level, and where it is that you could be progressing to. So you might even look at it as a team leader and just take 6 of the questions and say that how well are we working with those things? And I think it could complement some of the things that Hassan was talking about with the assessments that you guys are doing. So with that, thank you. It's interesting to be here, and glad I was able to hear a couple of the presenters. I wasn't going to get up any earlier than 3 to do this, though.